room, and I would request to board members as we proceed with discussions to please speak up so that those on the phone may hear you. I would like to ask Linda Stanley to conduct roll call, please.
Director Chisholm.
Here.
Director Kortner.
Here.
Director Davis.
Here.
Director Hedrick.
Here.
Director Kraus.
Here.
Director Kremen.
Here.
Did you hear?
Yes,
Okay.
I did. Director Pryor.
Here.
Director Record.
Here.
Director Sethi.
Here.
Director Stone.
Here.
Director Chang.
Here.
All are present.
And I would like to welcome Director Chang. I believe this is your first meeting as an official board member, is that correct?
It is. Take it easy on me, please.
Welcome. Well, that's why you're at the end of the table.
Thank you.
Stick around, maybe you'll move.
I've only known for about 25 years.
I have a motion in a second. Let's just leave it there. To approve the budget. Any further discussion? Again, let's go to a roll call vote.
Director Sethi.
Aye.
Director Pryor.
Aye.
Director Record.
Aye.
Director Davis.
Aye.
Director Kremen.
Yes.
Director Hedrick.
Aye.
Director Stone.
Aye.
Director Kortner.
Aye.
Director Kraus.
Aye.
Director Chang.
Aye.
Director Chisholm.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item 7B. Consider and authorize the executive director to execute an agreement for audit services with Richardson Company for an amount not to exceed $8,800 for the fiscal year. And again, I will turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Director Davis. This is actually one of the more difficult recommendations I made, surprisingly, given all of the interesting things that we are dealing with. Background, as an independent entity, we're required to have an external audit. I think it's good practice. We all think that's a good thing to do. As you have seen in both the budget and you'll see in June's report, the basic activities and transactions that have occurred over the past year and we anticipate occurring over the coming year for the authority are relatively simple. I joke that you could actually audit every transaction that we will have accomplished this year because they show up in this document. So we sent out an RFP to a dozen firms or so. We received 4 responses. I evaluated them. I had the opportunity to talk with several members, staff from your members' agencies, and it really came down to 2 firms. One was Vasquez and Company, and the other was Richardson and Company. I'm recommending that we would hire Richardson Company for a couple of reasons. The first is their extensive experience with both the state water project contract, so their understanding of sort of what we're trying to do working with the Department of Water Resources, as well as their understanding of the Central Valley project contract, since they've done a lot of work with contractors on that side of the project as well. The other reason is they've got extensive experience working with water agencies, water authorities, and finance authorities as well. Their not to exceed was 8,800. Vasquez was 4,000, but that's basically due to the number of hours. Richardson made their proposal based on 100 hours. Vasquez was less than half that, about 40. So their average hourly rate is about the same. My expectation is, to the extent the level of effort is about the same, we would be in that same range. The last thing I would note is both these firms are good. I've had the opportunity to work with both of them, and they're very competent. So it just came down to that, just a little bit more understanding experience with the state project and Central Valley project, which really drove my recommendation. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I will add also that the executive committee had a meeting earlier this month, and we discussed this at some level of detail and did not have a specific recommendation, but at that point in time indicated to Brian that we would certainly listen to whatever his recommendation was, and that's come forward here. Any questions for him?
Just clarification, so for this first year, like I said, it's pretty simple, not a lot of transactions. So you're assuming that then we negotiate the first year down a little bit on the
Well,
price?
it's going to be dependent on level of effort, so I
Yeah.
expect them, it's a not to exceed, I expect them to come in lower than that, frankly. We're talking $4,000.
I think the motion, whoever makes the motion, would be probably to authorize the executive director to negotiate that agreement, so.
So moved.
Motion by Kathy?
Jeff, I did have a question. I don't know whether we wait
Can-
until...
Let's just see if we have a second first, and then you can ask a question. Is your
I'll
second-
second.
Paul seconds. Okay, go ahead, Robert.
I certainly don't have a problem with the recommendation. I guess my question would be, would there be an ability to extend the contract out for multiple years if it was appropriate?
Yes, and in fact, that's what we would propose to do. The RFP was for a period of 5 years. So we would have annual renewals to the extent they're doing a good job, and to the extent that we decide we want to do something else, or the level of activity changes, and we're going to have to come back to you and talk about a different level of effort, we would probably want to do another redo and see where we are. But at this point, we have the ability just to roll them over for up to 5 years.
So we have a motion from Director Kortner to authorize Brian to negotiate an agreement with Richardson, a second from Director Sethi. Any other comments, input? If not, Linda?
Okay. Director Sethi?
Aye.
Director Pryor?
Aye.
Director Record?
Aye.
Director Davis?
Aye.
Director Kremen?
Aye.
Director Hedrick?
Aye.
Director Stone?
Aye.
Director Kortner?
Aye.
Director Kraus?
Aye.
Director Chang?
Aye.
Director Chisholm?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to item 7C, report from Kathryn Mallon, Executive Director for the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority. Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you for the invitation, Brian. Introduce myself. I've been working together very shortly. I'm a registered California PE. I have about 30 years of experience in the design and construction of mostly water infrastructure. My most relevant experience, I think, for this current position was as the Deputy Commissioner in New York City. I managed the capital program for the city's water and wastewater infrastructure. That was about a $15 billion capital plan. I also was assigned as the manager to oversee the emergency housing recovery in New York City in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. So started as the executive director here in mid-March, and I've spent time meeting lots of people and trying to understand the lay of the land a little bit and help stand up this nascent organization. We're all familiar with the recent change in the project announced by the governor, so I've been working with the DWR to figure out how to best support them from an engineering perspective. And we've spent a lot of time trying to understand a lot of the gaps in the work that have been done to date that left us unable to answer some of the questions that came up in the last round of analysis. So we want to be able to work in a very transparent, collaborative process with the public and make sure that we do sufficient engineering work so that they clearly understand what the alternatives are on the table, what the impacts are, and what the mitigation is. And I'm looking forward to it. It's the way that I've worked in the past on all the projects that I've done. And I plan to approach this one that same kind of transparency and openness that I've worked in the last 30 years. So very excited to be here.
Kathryn, congratulations. Excellent use of the word nascent. Are there questions for Kathryn? Obviously, we're going to have to work very closely with them because if you guys recommend we move forward with some kind of construction or something, we're going to have to find some way to sell bonds to pay for it. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Everything costs money, huh?
Okay.
going to say thank you for coming here. I haven't had an opportunity to meet you. I've heard a lot about you, a lot of good things.
So sometime you can get together with a bunch of us so we can compare registered CD numbers. And see
Oh,
what those
awesome.
numbers are.
Mine started the early 90s.
I think maybe a lot of us got registered about the same time. So.
The other measure is how often you've actually used that number.
Yeah. I'll be back here in
One final question, Yankees fan or Mets fan?
Neither, actually. Sorry.
Okay, that's an acceptable answer.
The Brooklyn Nets Stadium was about 3 blocks from my
Oh, nice.
apartment, so that was my sports team.
Okay. That was where the Democrats had their convention, I believe.
Yeah.
A couple years ago. Yes, I remember that. Okay. Move on to reports and announcements. Executive Director's report.
Just very briefly, I've provided a written report. As you know, we didn't have meetings, so most of my activities were meeting with bankers, consultants, attorneys, board members, and two things I would note during this time period. One is that the FPPC actually approved our conflict of interest code. You all got a bunch of emails. You're now enabled to file your Form 700s electronically in the future ongoing basis. And secondly, and Steve may want to talk a little bit more about it, we did receive 2 Public Record Act requests, one referencing communications between Director Kremen and I forgot the name of the organization, and another about the selection process for our general counsel. We responded to them. We haven't heard anything. And that's my report.
Brian, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the budget, the possibility of some kind of a website. I think that's a good idea. Probably a lot of directors do too. Is that something that we would need to authorize you to do? Would we have to take some action on that, or
I
you think you have the authority to do
yeah,
that?
I think you've authorized the budget. We've already been working on it, and it's really on me to get that set up. What I would propose is that once we have sort of a test, we would come back to you all so we could run through it so you could see what's on there. Your suggestions will be critical and very helpful as we move forward. I think it'll be a little more colorful than the one we have today.
Any other questions? Right.
The last point I would make on that, and I think it's a good one, is I think having our own website is important because the DCFA and the DCA really are 2 separate organizations, and I think sometimes people conflate the 2. Our authorities are very different. Our purpose is very different from the DCA, and this will help with that distinction.
And meeting chair, Director Kremen, I might make a point if people can hear me.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just, I think we've talked about not just $30,000 for a website. That would be pretty excessive. I think we'd all agree. It's about also, in addition, doing some community and stakeholder outreach about the mission.
Yeah, that's
Excellent.
why we put that in the budget. Thank you, Director.
Anything else under general managers or under executive director's report? Okay, let's move on to general counsel's report, and my script says, Mr. O'Neill, do you have a report?
Yes, Mr. Davis. It's been pretty quiet since the last time I appeared here in February. Brian essentially stole my report with the only really truly legal issue that came up was 2 Public Records Act requests. The first one was on March 14th. We received it from an entity called Restore the Delta, requesting communications between Director Kremen and an entity called Coalition for a Sustainable Delta and the Westlands Water District. They were asking for those communications from late 2018 to the present. We responded to that request. We did not have any responsive records, but we completed our response to that request. And then on April 4th, 2019, we got a request from a law firm called Damrell Nelson. They were seeking proposals and evaluation for the general counsel selection process. And we produced documents responsive to that on April 19th. I have not heard anything further from both of those requesting parties. So that's been the extent of kind of pure legal issues.
And that's one of the reasons, too, for having a website, is just to have some kind of a standard format that people can use for Public Records Act requests, right?
Yeah, it's a good practice to have a form that complies with 6250, the code.
Any questions, comments from the board? All right, moving on. So that would be treasurer's report.
Thank you, Director Davis. I have a report in your packet. The only thing that I would add, subsequent to March 31st, we did issue invoices for the final round for this fiscal year for our dues, and we've received all of them to date except one. So that is a good thing. And then in addition, with the approval of the budget, we will send out the invoices August 1st, but since September 1st is a Sunday, and we won't be working, and neither will you, and September 2nd is the holiday, and I know you all will be joining. We won't be expecting payment until September 3rd. And that is about all I have.
Thank you, June. Any questions from the board members? Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll close the open portion of the meeting, and we do have a closed session. Conference with legal counsel regarding Government Code Section 54956.9E, potential litigation warrant case. We'll take a very short break, and then we will reconvene to closed session. Are there any future agenda items that we would like to recommend today? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned at 12:24.